Okay, I guess we'll go ahead and get started, everyone. So appreciate, yeah, what's that? Yeah, we got one more person coming, but yeah, I'll do it. All right, well, thanks everyone for showing up today. We've got a great turnout, and yeah, very, very good. So I'm going to hit the next slide. Just to do a couple of announcements before we get going here. First off, we always like to thank our sponsors for the section. So we currently have 22 sponsors. So the ones on the left are the ones that have been sponsoring for the last few years. We have some sponsors that were introduced this past year, and even in the last few weeks, we picked up a few sponsors. So we really appreciate all the companies out there who sponsor the section. By sponsoring the section, it allows us to do these meetings and keep the the food free for members and nominal fee for non-members. So it really helps out. Also gives us some funding to do some other things like First Robotics, our scholarship program, things like that. So we really appreciate all of our sponsors. And if anybody's interested in being a sponsor, Wayne's updated our website and put some links in there to make it very easy for you to sign up and be a sponsor. But if you have any questions, you can let me know as well. A couple local events. There's an international sponsor of ISA called BMEX, and they have their annual calibration exchange event going on at UNO this month, September 18th and 19th. It's a two-day event, several keynote speakers, lots of hands-on with calibration, instrumentation, and it's $350 for 2 days, or you can do a single day for $195. It'll be at UNO. We've posted this information on our website, so if you just go to neworleansisa.org, you can click on the registration link and sign up for the event. BMEX is going to actually take the funds from this event, and they're going to create a scholarship for UNO, and we're going to go in with them and assist with that scholarship as well. So we've had a scholarship program for a number of years, which we haven't exercised in a while. So we're going to use this as an opportunity to get some scholarships out as a result of this meeting. Next. Another event coming up in October is LAGCO. So LAGCO is a oil and gas exposition. It's held every other year. Typically, it has been held in Lafayette for as far back as I can remember, and it was always held at the Cajun Dome. Well, this year they're going to do it at the Montreal Convention Center. It's October 9th through 11th. It's a global event, so there'll be people from all over the world coming in to learn about oil and gas. They have given us a 10% discount for ISA members. So if you're an ISA member, you can use this promo code ISA NOLA 2019 and get a 10% discount on your registration for that event. And with that, I'm going to introduce Nat. Been a member of our section for a long time with Chevron Oronite, and he's going to talk to us about control system modernization, kind of with an eye on digital transformation. And really pleased for him to present this material that he presented at a conference over the summer. And he's worked it up for this crowd as well and tweaked a few things, and got really good response and turnout. So really appreciate you coming out to do this, Matt. And that now, it's going to go through the presentation. Please, if you would, save your questions for the end, and then we'll do a Q&A right at the end. So Matt, turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sure I don't need a mic. That's what I've been told. Thanks. I'll be making sure that everybody's available. All right. So, like Dean introduced, I've been in the local area for about 18, 20 years now, and I've been with Chevron Oronite. And I've been a member of the ISA New Orleans section for a while in I was kind of like in the office positions, but then because of my work commitments and other things, I could not continue the office position, but I tried to support. And when Dean approached me with this, basically he ran through my article. It was published in Control Engineering magazine as well. So I think when Dean ran through it, he approached me and said, "Hey," I said, "Of course, for our chapter, we can do it anytime." So I was very fortunate that he was able to pick a time that was suitable when I was available in town. So I think it worked out really well for all of us. Again, thank you all for being here. I got quite a lengthy presentation, so I don't want you to feel bored. I'll try to keep going as much as I can. And then at some point in time, we'll try to stop. I know that you all have to go back to, and I have to go back to continue our day jobs as well. So I'll try to see how much we can keep this. So first of all, we'd like to start everything on safety. Any conference, any sections, any meetings, anything on safety, right? So we all from industry where, or even whether we are from the industry or not, safety is a primary focus, right? So I was looking at this. It's the slide, the board here serves as a very good reminder of everything that we talk in our facilities on a day-to-day basis, right? So let's just make sure that safety is on top of everything that we do, whether we retire, whether we work at home, whether we do our personal chores, or we are work focus on anything. So let's make sure that safety is not a it has to become a habit rather than somebody trying to preach to you every day. It has to come from within, right? So let's make sure that safety is a prime focus. So the topic that I'm going to be talking about today is basically my own personal experience that I'm sharing with the industry and my colleagues and my friends. Basically what we at Chevron Ornet had to do and what I had to go through as part of the one that started as a lifecycle management project, and where it ended up being and where the journey has been continuing. So like how we progressed once we kind of initiated this project, how it became a program, and where we are and what we are looking at based on how fast things have been changing in the world we are living in today, right? So that's pretty much what I'll be kind of focusing on as we go through today. It started with modernizing process control systems, but where we are today, before I could even finish the program that we started on, things have evolved. So that's where you see that focus on digital acceleration coming in and kind of, I would not say derailing the original ideas, but kind of disrupting the original ideas and then changing the path of our migration and modernization efforts. So it's purely based on what we went through and what our experience is. All right, so just a quick introduction about Chevron Ornet. I mean, I'm sure you all know about Chevron, but the division of the Chevron where we come from, our facility is located in Belchase on the West Bank by the naval base. And what we do there is we are a wholly owned subsidiary of Chevron, but we manufacture lubes and additives. The things that you see, the most easy way for me to reference that is Chevron with Techron. You know about Techron. Everybody heard of Techron, I'm sure. So that's the kind of division, that's a division where I come from. It's part of downstream operations. And we are here down in Belchase. We are the only facility in the North American. We have a small facility in Brazil, but we have three major facilities, one in North America, one in France, and one in Singapore. And then we have a few other small facilities and regional plants as well. One thing I want to make sure is I'm right here. You'll see some technologies being presented, some ideas being presented. It's purely based on what we have experienced and what we are going through. I'm not trying to recommend that you have to do the same thing or you have to follow the same technologies. I'm not taking up for any particular technology either. So I just want to make sure that you're all aware of that. So digital transformation and control systems migration, right? Some journey. So I'm not sure how much you all have been hearing this. I wanted to pick some quotes from famous people in the industry on what they've been talking about from a digital transformation perspective, right? So we know everything that is what we are doing today is pretty much we use our phones day to day in our normal lives. Our families use it, and how we used to communicate and what we used to do a few years back and how things are changing, right? So that's exactly what is going on. One that is happening in our day-to-day lives is what is happening in our industry as well, right? So it's emerging as a driver for sweeping changes. So one thing that we know is we know that there has been industrial revolutions and industrial transformation. Where we are today in the industrial transformation revolution is we are in Industry 4.0. I'm not sure if you all have heard the term. I'm sure you've heard the term. For those who have heard it, it may be like kind of I'm repeating it. the term Industry 4.0. That's the new revolution that we are in today, where everything is more in terms of digital transformation and digital. The way we do our jobs day to day is being disrupted tremendously, right? So we are in this world of a new revolution and transformation that we are going through right now. And it has got a tremendous opportunity, and it's changing the whole paradigm of our traditional control system field and how people used to see us and what they saw us. It is changing it a whole lot. So digital innovation is shaping our industry by disrupting the existing businesses and operating models too. It's just not how we operate our systems and how the mindset that we have to create in our facilities. That is also changing a whole lot. Again, the skills required to do the work today is totally different from what it was yesterday or what it's going to be tomorrow. It's changing. It's changing. Change is inevitable. It is there whether you like it or not, whether any of us like it or not. It is happening whether we are getting on board and going with it, we're going to adapt to it, or we are just going to be left behind. I think that is extremely important to understand it, first of all, right? So another big thing is how I'm a traditional process control engineer who came up from pneumatics and hydraulics, right? So to me, IT is okay. They're there to disrupt what we do. They're there to put like kind of roadblock and showstopper in what we do. That's how I grew up and how I evolved in the industry, right? But where we are going today, again, it's basically adoption. There is no questions about it. You have to embrace IT. IT and operations and technology have to come together, right? There's no if, else, but, then questions, nothing. It is there. It is where we are going. So you better make friends with your IT counterparts pretty soon if you have not already done so. And again, technology is going to be, you got to make sure that it's very accessible, and it is there right now. It's changing the whole way we look at our industry and how we do our things. We have to have an agile mindset. Again, this agile terminology is very popularly used within Chevron, kind of based on the way we do our businesses right now, right? So like having traditional project methods, right? So you're all used to traditional project methods. We are used to traditional project methods, but is that going to fulfill or cut the make the cut in the today's environment, right? Maybe not, because the technologies are changing so much. You should have an agile mindset. You can have a plan, but you should be able to recalibrate your plan and readjust and reaccommodate and reshape your plan as you need to, as you see things changing and evolving, right? Another major reason why we are seeing so much of digital transformation and the things that you could be hearing. So some of the things that what I'm talking about here in this slide is pretty much what you keep hearing about in the industry and around you, right? So what is data, right? We have tons of data. We generate tons of data. We use that data, right? But are we using the data in the right way, and is it easily accessible for us to use, right? How are we converting the data to information, and how we make that convert that information to insights and a decision making for our management, for our superiors, for our operators, right? So what is the use of having the data if it's not useful for day-to-day requirements, or irrespective of who it is, whether it's down to the bottom line operator or to your managing director, right? Every one of those data that we generate from the process control systems is going to be useful. And the reason I'm talking about all this is every one of this thing, what I'm talking about, comes back to our industry, process control industry and process automation industry, right? So everything that we do is in the core of what I'm talking about, because I'm basically a process control engineer, right? So I'm not an IT person, but we have to embrace it. There is no choice. And what I'm talking about here is all centered around, you may have a question, man, why is he talking about all this? I'm a process control engineer, or I'm an instrumentation engineer, or I'm a project manager, right? But not having that information in your mind or not having that know-how is going to come and not be useful for us, or we don't want to kind of shy away from what we have been, what we are going to be faced with, right? So yes, this is disruptive technology. It is changing the way we do things. It is going to change the architectural transfer. It's going to bring about architectural transformation. It is going to convert data into information. Information security is going to become a problem. Analytics, IoT, cloud. You hear all these terms going around, right? But one thing I want you to all remember, don't get disturbed by it. Yeah, hear it. Try to know about it. Try to learn about it. Try to see what it is, right? But I want you to pass on a personal message that I found it very useful. Is like, okay, when people in your plant or in your industry or in your offices talk about all this, I want to keep you one thing. I want you all to keep one thing in mind: is don't let this bother you or phase you. Right? Yes, everything is true. Everything what they're talking about is true. But see how you can start. You have to start somewhere. Where do you start? Without having a start listening to all this and panicking is not going to be any good. So let's take a step in first, right? So that is where I keep saying, where does it all start? I say control systems is where it all starts for us. Where it matters most is control systems. If you go to any industry, what we do is what everyone, it fits in every one of these aspects that I've been talking about, right? So that's why I'm so passionate about this subject when it comes to why is it so important for control systems. And I want to send a direct message that don't feel disturbed. Take it in phases, take it in slow steps, but don't ignore it either, right? That's the key message, is don't ignore it, right? So like I said, there's a lot of topic and I can keep talking about it. Sometimes I get carried away. So I'll spend a lot of time in a few slides, first few slides, to make sure that I drive the bottom line message in. But as we go through, we'll see how it changes our perspective, right? So and I'll show some real examples of what we did to prove what I'm talking about, right? So, sorry. So what are the benefits of digital acceleration, right? So one other thing I want to keep bringing, this is just basically some introduction into what you're going to see afterwards. When it comes to accelerating digital transformation, what we did was, okay, we started our project or our program 3-4 years back with as a life cycle project to update our control systems and make sure that we can keep our control systems up to date with technology or whatever is needed as a compliance requirement, right? But what happened was, as we went through, there was a plan for digital transformation, digital acceleration, all those terms that I was talking about, it was coming into picture. So what I said was, okay, let's plan to better manage our life cycle of a control system assets and see, okay, when I'm spending so many millions of dollars and trying to upgrade my control systems, what else can I do to fit my projects or my program into the corporate vision that my corporate is asking me to do in terms of digital acceleration or digital transformation, right? So that's how it started. And it's very important that you have to have two sets of people who are involved in this, right? One is our decision makers or managing people who are in the higher ups, right? So they want information quickly. They come to you and say, hey, I need this information, what's going on? So instead of you starting to pull up your trends and pull up your information and start trying to piecemeal together, how can I easily provide that? Or can I provide that to them even without them coming to me, right? So what can I do to help them? So as I'm going through my upgrades and trying to spend those money, dollars, and trying to come up with the new technologies, can I also incorporate this? It'll be a small incremental addition, but it'll, from a value perspective, it could be a large proposition, right? So those are the kind of things that we were looking into as we were going through in terms of digital acceleration. So ensure operations are up to par with current technology, right? So that's where it all starts. Like I said, control systems where it all starts. So who's the core of our control systems? Who's the owner of the control systems? Our operators, right? Day-to-day people who are dealing with the problems and who are dealing with the real life situation. So what can you do to help them make their jobs better, right? So when you go to them and tell them, hey, I'm spending $100 million in trying to upgrade all my technology across all my facilities and all the world, they're like, okay, so what does it do to me, right? So what is it for me? That's the first question that they're going to ask. And your operation stakeholders are going to say, hey, why do you want me to shut down my operations? Because you're going to upgrade your technologies or your DCS systems, right? So that is where making sure that them as an important stakeholder, they feel the worth, they feel the value of it is very, very important. Right. So some of the examples that we did was like, okay, well, how can I help them better with manage their alarms? How can I integrate their alarms into the day-to-day like functional requirements rather than it being seen and being reactive? How can I create a proactive approach based on it? How can I automate their procedures that they do, like starting up a unit or shutting down a unit or doing a grade change or whatever it is, right? What can we do to improve that? So those are some of the things that we did. So we kind of looked at a wide range of aspects and then said, okay, how can we drive value and what can I do as part of my modernization to help drive this value to do this? So another major reason why we have to do digital acceleration is if you look at a vendor, right, we have different aspects in our industry, different players in our industry, right? We have vendors, we have consultants, we have manufacturers, we have end users, we have a wide range of players in our industry, right? So there is always, every one of them has a role to play in this. So manufacturing today may not be able to maintain their, like people like your DCS vendors, your PLC vendors, they may not be able to maintain their competitive advantage if they don't follow the same footsteps. Like I said, this thing is changing the entire industry. This digitization, this digital world age is changing the entire industry. Every aspect of the digital industry, right? Every aspect of the industry. So they have to do it. So when they are doing it, it is going to have a domino effect on us. Microsoft is going to do it. Amazon is going to do it. Your Google is going to do it. Everybody's doing it. Everybody's following in those footsteps. So why not us, control systems? Then why do we have to be left behind, right? So what do we do to keep up with that? That's why our management is pushing on us, saying, hey, everybody is changing, whether you like it or not. The business is changing, the environment is changing. So what can you do to provide the same level of to keep our competitive advantage against our competitors, right? So that is where this becomes very important. Again, digital platform for process control networks can directly improve workflow efficiencies and operator effectiveness. That's something that we have seen also, is like, how can it directly benefit what we do? So talking about digital acceleration and control systems, we have to always focus on pretty much making sure that we know what we are doing, and we try to make sure that it is not a selling point to our management to get our projects approved, but it's also to make sure that we kind of try to bring this message to them. It's like, hey, what is that proposition that I'm bringing to your table? What is a win-win situation here, right? So how do we keep ourselves in line with the corporate objectives, but at the same time make our lives easier and do a project or get a funding for the project, which kind of benefits and falls right in line with the management objectives and strategies, corporate strategies, right? So that is the reason why I'm trying to go through some of these slides, because when you are faced with a project or a scenario like this, it'll help if you can think in these terms. Again, I've been talking about digital, right? So I wanted to kind of also relate it. I've been touching on this for a few minutes earlier. So what I would like to also make sure that you take away today is, as a process control industry, right? How is it related? Why are we bothered about it? What is concerning in this to us, right? So I want to make sure that every one of you here or on the phone is able to make sure that we are able to directly relate to, how is it going to impact me? How is it going to impact my work, what I do on a day-to-day basis, right? So change is not easy. Again, one thing that we have to all acknowledge is, I'm sure you've all seen this, is whether it's in your own personal lives or in your professional lives, change is not easy. And it's especially when it comes to managing changes in the control systems. Like I said, operations is the first ones who are going to come and ask, hey, what is it in for me, right? Why do you want me to change these things, right? So that is where establishing a vision and the strategy is going to be very, very critical. You have to first lay out a vision, lay out a strategy. Formulating that strategy itself is going to take a long time, and establishing that vision is going to take a long time. But you have to be patient. You have to tell your management to be patient till they see the outcome of what you're doing. And I'll show some examples of what we did, right? Make sure that you establish a strong vision, establish a strategy, and then ask for patience and be kind of like, most of all, try to have an ambition, be ambitious, try to participate in these kind of events, go out, learn, bring information, and then present it. A lot of times your operational management or your management may not be aware of some of these things. It's our responsibility to bring this information and ideas to them, right? So every project, every opportunity has to be evolving from an idea, right? So how can I be a trendsetter? How can I be someone out of the box? How can I be not follow the grind of the and just be something different, right? So think in those terms. Again, you need both management support and your stakeholder support. It has to be both top-down driven and bottoms-up driven. The process control world is moving more towards this IT-OT convergence. Again, like I said, OT, operational technology, right? Like our DCS operations and all that. IT, of course, is information technology. How is it all coming together? Whether we like it or not, it's all there. For us to be able to win in this fast-changing world, we have to make faster decisions. Our management wants to make faster decisions, right? So how can digital technologies and all these things that we do help us in helping us make decisions faster, helping our management and operations, people above and below us, may help them make this decision faster, right? Again, when you're upgrading the traditional platforms infrastructure, can we do it on a scalable basis? Nobody's got $1 million sitting. No, none of your management or our management is going to give us saying, okay, how can I, here you go, do this. Just because the world is changing, I tell them, nobody's going to give it to you. You have to put a plan, you have to strategize it, and you have to be, the plan has to be like more modular in approach, right? How can it be scalable? You cannot do everything all you want. You can have an ambition, but again, you have to be practical as well, right? You cannot do everything on the same day. Nobody's got unlimited time or money or resource availability to do these things, right? So again, strategizing is very, very important. Digital strategy is all about maximizing values from these upgrades and volumes of data generated. That's a core message. If you have to take one message today, that's one message that you can take in saying what you want to do from a control systems perspective is digital strategy is about maximizing values. It can fit into process automation, provide value proposition. Like I said, you don't have to try to be scared of these terms. You're doing this almost, but maybe you would not realize what you're doing if you're already doing some of these things, right? Again, technology obsolescence and needs for improved, insightful. One of the things that we found was ours is predominantly a batch project, batch plan too. So how can we provide more insightful information from to our batch operations? What is coming in the future? How is this batch going to look like? How is this recipe going to look like and all that, right? So again, that's where, and again, having a good collaboration of a team is very, very essential. Like having people from process automation team, IT, your operations, your process engineering, having a good, strong cross-functional team is definitely going to help you in trying to strategize and make these things happen. So our outlook to modernization, right? Again, like I said, this is some examples of what I'm going to share with you or what we did. Our outlook on modernization was to take our platform, like we had, our technology is predominantly based on Honeywell's total plant solutions. Again, like I said in the beginning, I'm not talking for any technology, but I'm using our own personal examples of what we did. Honeywell's solutions, which was kind of like quite a legacy system that we used to have, and we have a lot of other PLCs, wireless systems, and we have integration to our ERP systems. We have a whole lot of technologies, a whole age of technologies, and like we have like all the way integration to the enterprise systems and all that, right? So what we did was we established a strategic outlook on process automation. We created a roadmap first, and then we said, okay, once this roadmap, how is this roadmap looking? Where are we currently, and how is it going to evolve, and what is it going to look like at the end game, and how flexible are we to change it if it needs to be? Like I said, ours started in 2014, and it's going to end probably in 2021. By the time it ends, by the time it was initiated and it ends, it's almost like 7 years, but a lot have changed in between. So we have to be able to be flexible and open about it. Our management was actively committed to managing these things from a life cycle of our automation assets, which is very important. Like I said, having that management buy-in is very, very critical. And again, new digital technologies combined with data-driven insights, it was very helpful. That particular thing was very helpful in getting a program and projects moving. So another big thing is the current resources that we have, whether it's process engineers, process control engineers, or operations. So especially the process control engineers who design and implement and maintain these things, if you look at the new age workforce that's coming up, they're not used to the traditional methods of working on PID controllers, working on control systems and all that, right? Their mindset, their outlook is completely different from what I used to do 20 years back in a process industry. So we have to be, as leaders or as project managers, we have to be willing to accept and agree that, okay, this is how they are. You cannot try to force your way of doing things on them. So how do you adapt to make sure that is a very important aspect as well. Why you need to do this changes, because then they're not going to be able to learn. You're not going to be able to find people to manage and maintain these legacy systems. How are we able to manage and be able to provide this to the next generation of people who are supposed to manage and maintain and run with these things, right? So how do you tune yourself into that next generation, right? So you go and give a dial phone to a lot of people, they may be lost today, the new kids, right? So you give them an iPhone, a smartphone, even a 5-year-old kid knows how to open up apps and do things, right? So that's the kind of analogy that I would like to use here. So that's another very important reason of why we think we need to look into these things as we go, aging workforce, right? And people not used to doing the traditional things anymore. And how do we make it easier for the new generation of engineers coming out? So with all this, we are moving into the new era of process automation, right? So for us, that's how our journey began, right? So we started planning for a multi-year control system modernization. We started in 2013, and we went through multiple phases. Right now, we are still going through the third phase right now, where we are kind of finishing up the second phase of project, and we are into the third phase. So we are finished. We are in the tail end of modernizing and bringing up all the operator effectiveness requirements. And then the next phase is trying to make our batch management migration and using virtualization and all those new technologies, right? So which we hope to complete by 2021. At that time, what I can very proudly say is we'll be ahead of the technology curve at par, even within Chevron itself. So our facility will be like a flagship facility, trying to make sure that, okay, we are ahead of the technology curve. So now, another problem that I'm going to tell you is, like, if we are not willing to look into it wholeheartedly, holistically, and not be willing to adapt to the change, what is going to happen is you're going to find yourselves playing as a catch-up all the time, right? You'll be playing catch-up all the time. There'll never be a time when you can say, okay, now let me see, okay, I'm done with my upgrades. What can I do better with my installed infrastructure? What can I do? How can I help my business make better, faster decisions? How can I make more data-driven decisions? How can I be more proactive than reactive, right? So there has to be a time when you start thinking of being more proactive than being reactive. I think I can go around the room and asking how many of us do today reactive stuff and how many of us do proactive stuff. I'll be the first one to say that I'm always in a reactive mode still, even though I'm doing all this. We are still not there where we can say I'm proactively be able to be managed my systems and projects, right? So that is one of the very, very key elements is when are we going to be able to get away from being reactive and becoming more proactive? All right, so this is another slide. I just want to show you how things are talk about evolution, right? How things have evolved. So it's just as we are all kind of like process control people, I just wanted to use one slide to say, just show you where things are going, right? So we started way back with pneumatics and hydraulic controls. Then we kind of evolved and going to single loop, multi-loop electronic controls. Then came PLCs, then proprietary DCSs, and then they became DCS, open DCS systems. And then now we are in a field where then it became multi-level integration, different vendor systems being able to talk to each other using those OPCs and Modbus communications and all that, right? And now what you're seeing today is like basically the next generation dynamics, more information, data, digital, and all that, right? So this is kind of where you see things are evolving. Right now we are here, which is the Industry 4.0 generation we are in today, where things have completely evolved. I mean, I can proudly say that I come from here, so I know what things have happened. I've worked on pneumatics and hydraulics starting all the way to where we are today. So that's one of the reasons why I'm able to relate to this and be more passionate about this subject. I'm sure a lot of you here and people with some gray hair or no hair can relate to what I'm talking about. Another thing, remember I was telling you a human perspective, right? So why is it so important? What is it doing to the generation of today? So I just found this information and I wanted to share this to you. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but if you look at it, what was in the past to what was in the future, right? Just some examples of why I'm saying we are in a revolution. We have to be willing to adapt and learn, right? So how does an employee change today? The employee outlook has changed today, right? From the past, when we say work from 9 to 5, right? Today, the generation wants to work anytime at their own time, right? So we work in a corporate office, work anywhere, use company equipment, use any device, focus on inputs, focus on outputs, climb the corporate ladder, create your own ladder, right? So that's a mindset of the new generation. That's how they want to be. Whether you like it or not, that's how it is, right? So these are some of the reasons why we have to do what we are doing. And we have to start at the process control level also. It's just not at the IT level or the business level that people want to do this. In our industry, we have to be willing to do this, and we have to do this. We have to accept the fact, and we have to say, how do we make sure that this fact is going to be, how do we transform what we are doing to adapt and accept to these factual basis, right? So that's why it's so important, right? So this is a very, very important kind of like a slide that gives you an analogy and perspective of where we are and how things have evolved and how things are going to change, and why we should kind of keep all this in perspective when we do our projects and upgrades and modernization. So again, a shaping plan. I'm not going to go through every single block of this. We'll not have time to go through this on a full day basis. Just I want to give an idea of what we are, where we are, right? So the way I established our strategy, our shaping plan was, like I said, strategy and shaping plan is very, very important, right? So every one of you can do your own way, but it's very important to have that vision and look an outlook for your own systems and what you do on a day-to-day basis, right? So first of all, what I did was I looked at, okay, where we are today, what technologies do we have, and what is our roadmap on those technologies? Because the technology vendors are also driven by a lot of constraints. They are driven by Microsofts, they are driven by Dells, they are driven by IBMs. Everybody's driven. It's like a domino effect from one to the other, right? So where are they in terms of what they are doing? Where are we in our facilities on what we are doing? Yellow meaning that we are an okay stage, green means we are safe, and red means where we are not in a good shape, right? So, and then use that to kind of lay a roadmap of where we want to go, right? So do a roadmap and then see what your outlook is going to be at the end, right? So for your various aspects of your technology, your control systems, your historians, your other aspects of all the different parts of the control systems, the data integration, the ERP integration, all of those things, right? So basically lay the strategy out. Strategizing is very, very important, and planning is very important, right? So this is one slide that I was able to use to present to our management of saying that, hey, this is where we are. This is what vision is going to look like. And we started in 2006, and then where we are going to be in 2017. So like I said, have an ambition and have a plan, right? And be willing to change a plan. When I first set this slide out, I started with a plan to tell our management, okay, I want to finish all this by 2017. And this is what I think I can do by 2017. But things kept changing and changing. And then I had to redo things, and I said, okay, I'll do it in 2018. And today, if you saw my earlier slide, I was saying I'm going to finish it in 2021, right? That is the pace of changes that is happening as you go through. And if I had just stuck to my original plan, then I would be left behind. Another 4 years now, I would have been spending another $10-15 million project to keep doing where it is, right? So I was flexible to be able to adapt. And my upgrades doesn't mean that I did not do any changes or upgrades here, right? I was still doing changes and upgrades, but remember I told the word scalable. So that is why I was able to continuously reshape my plan, so that how I was based on what I learned, based on what the technology vendors are telling me, based on what the different things that's evolving in industry, right? Like from a digital, when I started it, there was not a term digital. Nobody was even really worried about what digital transformation meant or digital meant. But as today, after I put my plan together, by 2018, things started changing. So that's why I have to disrupt this and keep working on this plan still. I mean, this is another example of what, from a pure timeline perspective, right? So like I said, I wanted to finish in 2016, 2017, and right now we are in 2021. That is when I'm hoping to complete my program. And by 2021, hopefully we'll be kind of finished with our vision. And then from there, we'll be able to start utilizing all the upgrades that has been done, right? So if you see, I've been doing things from 2016, 2015 onwards, planning perspective, and then once we start executing it through our project management methods, so we just keep going on in this path. So that's how it changed. The previous slide changed to where we are currently from a historical perspective. So again, the reason why I'm showing all this and discussing all this is making sure that you understand that we are not going to be able to lay a plan and say that, yes, I'll be able to do what my plan is saying I'm going to do, based on if you're willing to listen to what the world around you is talking to you about. So some of the key elements of technology upgrades, right? So what we thought is, okay, from a strategy perspective, what is that I want from a technology upgrade perspective, right? So digital platforms, we already know what does it do, right? Again, an agile mindset, I spoke to you about it. So basically the summary of what you saw all in the previous slides is basically encourage iterative methodology, learn fast. It also goes to fail fast, right? So your plans may fail. again, try to improve that and see how can I change it to create more value, right? And then gain user feedback quickly and regularly reprioritize your backlog, right? So that is why you see that in the previous slide, you saw how my plan evolved, started where it started off and where it ended, because I was able to kind of use this method or use this strategy. So how did we go about achieving our digital vision, our digitization vision, along with our lifecycle upgrade, right? So one of the things that we did was, okay, we wanted to try and modernize our strategy or change our strategy to a digital vision by breaking down the efforts into step-by-step deployments, right? So instead of saying, okay, I'm doing a project, this is what I'm going to deliver in the project and go forward and deliver it, you saw in some of the previous slides like how we were able to break it. And again, one of the things that I said is you need to know how to build your foundation and foundation blocks, right? And how you can evolve it so that you don't do something in the middle and then it becomes a domino effect. Like, okay, now you say you're trying to build, you're trying to upgrade your system. You start, instead of kind of understanding and starting from where you are, what your scenario is, what your situation is, and trying to see what is my first block that I can touch. And even if I have to change it, it's not going to disrupt my entire domino, right? So you cannot go and pull a Jenga block right from the middle and hopefully expect that your entire stack is going to still be safe, right? So that's very, very important for us to know, right? So and again, what is the value proposition on each one of those step-by-step deployments, right? Extend the life of our control system, control environment, improve configuration and change management, optimize level alarm and operations management, get our lab information into Historian. So some of the things that we evolved, right? So when I'm talking about the iterative process, if I go back and try to do this now, because I did this first, I can do this anytime I want, right? But it's still in my roadmap. But I cannot go try to do this without having done my basic foundational aspects first, right? So that's why it's very important for you to lay the strategy and plan it on how you want to do it. So again, one of the big things is you may have multiple generations of systems in your facility. You may have different technologies, right? Planning, like I said, takes a long time. Execution comes next, because you need to think through every aspect of the change. So if you're going to go with one technology, one vendor, and say, okay, I'm going to upgrade this technology today, it may be interacting with so many other aspects of your facility, right? So you need to know what is that it is going to do. You need to understand, right? So understanding the core concepts is very, very essential first. And then how can I do it? By preserving my intellectual property, okay? So I don't have somebody who was working in my facility 10 years ago to come and reprogram this whole sequence for me, right? So can I preserve that intellectual property by still upgrading my technology, right? So think through that. So can you think through that? Can you do it? Can you afford to do it? So that you don't have to shut down your plant, you don't have to shut down your systems, or you can do a small shutdowns rather than taking a full facility shutdown, right? So those are the kind of things that I want you to keep in mind when you start planning for these things. So what we did was we went through some strategic migration approach. You'll see in this slide, I have underlined and bold, kind of like bold text, some of the key aspects, right? So that's the one that I want you to focus on. Don't worry about what we are doing in Chevron, right? But some of the things that, these are examples of what you're doing. You can use them as examples, but it may not fit into all your scenarios. So some of the key things that I want you to take away from here is, okay, for us, we were one of the first major facility to employ the fault-tolerant Ethernet. So you all have, I'm not sure how many of you are working on a control systems on a day-to-day basis. You might have heard of redundancy in control networks, redundancy in networks and all that. But those are like coax networks. There are traditional cable networks and all that. So what we did was Honeywell had a technology for doing fault-tolerant Ethernet to run your control systems on Ethernet directly. But again, making control system highly available, they were able to do it on a fault-tolerant Ethernet. So if one Ethernet network went down, the control system is still going to run on the second network automatically, seamlessly, right? So it's not like active-passive, it's active-active. So that is where we were able to use that, and we were one of the first sites to deploy it. Even within Honeywell, we were one of the first sites in North America to deploy this technology, right? That's another example. So again, well, intellectual assets is very, very critical. How much can you preserve your intellectual assets, right? So from legacy platform to the new generation platforms, deploy new controllers, which can work as peer-to-peer nodes to your traditional controllers. Do you need new controllers to be adding on? Can you evolve? Can you kind of build on your existing control systems and add new technologies can you upgrade your current controllers and controller technologies to such an extent, to an extent where if you put a new generation controller, it can seamlessly work next to each other, right? So think through those things. That's what I meant by peer-to-peer technology there, right? The third thing is, can it integrate? How can it integrate into the legacy systems? All this modern technology and modern vision that we have and what we're talking about, can it integrate into your legacy systems, right? So that's another thing that you need to really think about. So integration is a very, very important aspect while maintaining your intellectual property again, right? So you can modernize your control systems, you can have an outlook on everything, but you cannot forget your core, you cannot forget your bases, you cannot forget your roots as well. How important is it to preserve your roots? Your plant has been making money based on those roots all these days. You just cannot go and say, hey, my world is changing today, I want to go put in there and disrupt your business, and you're not able to deliver product for another 6 months, then what is the use, right? So you got to make sure that that is also important. That is how you win the hearts of your business stakeholders and get approvals to do these projects, right? How can you make sure that you maintain those things, but yet adapt, right? Maintain yet adapt, right? So that's a very, very important aspect that I want you to take away from this slide is how do you strategize your migration approach or your life cycle approach when you're able to maintain this? Address obsolescence and prepare for future, right? So that's a very, very important thing. So you have to address obsolescence. There's no question. That is a life cycle management, right? You have to manage the life cycle of your assets. But at the same time, how do you adapt yourself to prepare for the future as well? So addressing obsolescence by itself is not going to help if you're not, again, like we have seen so many examples, and I've been talking about this for a while. So without this, you don't win in your situation, in any of our situations, right? So that's very, very important. So some of the things is like we upgraded our controllers first, then we made sure we maintain our intellectual property, we retain control strategies, operator display, history information, and we made sure that there was minimum disruption to operations. We modernized simultaneously, addressing the traditional networks with the new networks, traditional controllers with the new controllers. So some of the terms you see are proprietary Honeywell technology terms because we are predominantly a Honeywell technology facility. So you don't have to worry about it. Just think of the concepts, right? The control networks, controllers, those things are the key elements to this particular slide. There's examples of what we have done, but doesn't mean that it applies to every one of you. But the term controller, control modernization, control network modernization, all that is still a generic term that you can make sure it fits in your needs. One of the biggest things that you're going to see is the virtualization. Virtualization is going to be very, very important. That's one of the major game changers in our process industry as we go through. I'll talk about it in a minute. Oh, something wrong in my slide. There you go. Okay, so virtualization. Okay, I do not know how many of you are aware of what virtualization is. It's basically taking your traditional PCs and putting it on virtual. This is, again, it goes back to IT, OT convergence, right? So this is a totally purely IT technology. What we are talking about here is a purely IT, but it is making a large impact on our day-to-day control systems, right? Your operations, your controllers, your PCs and all that, right? There's no more physical PCs. One physical PC can run 10 virtual PCs going forward, right? So that's the kind of virtualization. What we're talking about is we used to have stacks and stacks of PCs running your control systems. Now you can have one set of machine that runs entire control network in your facility, right? So basically they're all the virtual systems. And again, this is a major change in technology that everybody in the industry is working, adapting and running on. So you don't have to put your physical controllers anymore. Using a virtual, they can do emulated controllers right now. So again, this is the power of technology and change that I'm talking about as where things are going towards. You don't have to maintain racks and racks and cabinets worth of controllers and PCs to run your operator stations and all that. Virtualization is going to change everything. It's a complete new dynamic in our process control industry, especially the way we are able to do get away from traditional cabinets. It provides a lot of benefits for us. It helps reduce space in your control rooms, in your rack rooms. It helps reduce energy consumption. It helps reduce the AC HVAC design in your control in your rack rooms. It's a tremendous thing that's going on. But again, you need to have that vision. You need to have IT and OT working together. You need to be able to partner with your IT teams and be able to bring these technologies, and your technology vendor has to be able to support this. I mean, whether we like it or not, technology vendors like Microsofts and Dells and IBMs, Everybody's working on this. Again, you heard of terms cloud, right? So this is a step before the cloud. So right now, what you've done is you've taken 100 pieces and put it in a virtual environment in a one single box, right? The next step is taking that out of that box and putting it in your cloud, right? So that is where you go. That's a evolution that is happening, whether you like it or not. It is happening, right? And everybody's, that's what if you go to any conferences, that's what you'll hear. It's like, hey, I'm running my application on cloud, Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Web Services. Everybody's doing this, like Google Web Services. Everybody's doing it. So how much, and process industry is also, process control industry is also being impacted by it, right? Are you willing to take it up? Are you willing to maintain your 100 PC boxes in 100 cabinets, or are you willing to move towards this, right? So these are some of the examples of what I'm talking about. This is a big time game changer in our industry today. Again, some of the things that we did, we also helped our plant operations by bringing values, right? How do I bring alarms and operations management? Again, are we willing to continue to work on reactive mode? Are we going to do proactive mode? Is it operations, when they get an alarm, they're just going to go based on their experience and say, okay, I get an alarm, I go look at my field there and do something to my control valve, or shut off a pump, or go check out my level measurement, drop a gauge and see, reel gauge and see if I'm having a right level or not, or are we going to be able to provide information for operations on what they have to do? So all the alarm information directly on operator screen, directly on their graphics. That's something that we did as a value proposition using Honeywell's Dynamo technology, right? So that is one of the biggest things. And next, another major thing is, okay, talking about reactive versus proactive, right? This last bullet here is a key element of that. So I'm not sure how many of you have heard of the ISA 584 requirements. So that's a new way of controlling your plant within a certain safe boundaries before you let your process get into alarm situation, right? So that's more of critical process monitoring loops and stuff, where you don't let your process go reach an alarm state. How can you manage your process and your controls and your control loops before they get into that alarm state, right? So that is what it is. It's called a boundary management. You set a boundary for your process and not let it go to the alarm state. Can you do that? Yes, you can. There are technologies that can help you do that. And that way, your operators are not running constantly off alarms, but they're maintaining their processes and their controls more proactively, in not being reactive to an alarm. And sometimes when you wait for an alarm, bad things can happen if you're not fast enough to react, right? So how safe can you keep your facility? How proactively you can manage your facility's safety, right? So that's a very important aspect of that. Again, operator effectiveness versus value creation, right? So we did high performance graphics, not doing traditional graphics. How can I make my graphics more value to my operations, rather than them seeing on the graphics and trying to run through millions of pages and trying to see what they want to do, right? So how can I make it more effective? Again, alarm management, procedural operations always, so any facility that you go to, there's going to be like some kind of a procedure that they have to follow, right? When they're starting up a unit from a shutdown, or when they're doing a grade change, how can you automate those procedures instead of them having to go through binders of manual based on somebody what is written and then following step by step? Can you automate those procedures? Yes, you can. That is what procedural operation automation that we are doing at our facility right now. Again, integrating StarLimbs, which is a lab information. So for your process, for your operator, if they can get the lab results up ahead and be able to look at what is going on with my quality of my product ahead of time, rather than waiting for somebody from the lab to call them, hey, you're running your plant in your process not in a safe state, or it doesn't meet your specifications, then that is something that we can do proactively here. Again, some HMIs, integrating documentation. So even for your process control engineers, they need a lot of documentation, right? Can you integrate into the control systems? Why do you have to maintain a separate set of documentation? So we are doing that. Batch operations, performance reports, futuristic batch solutions, basically meaning that, hey, if I'm running a batch facility, what are the next steps that's happening in my recipe? Can I tell my operator 4 hours from now, what is my recipe going to do? Where am I in my recipe today, and what is going to happen? What does he have to do? Can I proactively tell? That's a new visualization methods of where we tell operations. And then if each one of my step has to take 2 hours, if my step is taking 2.5 hours, that means something is going wrong. Can I prompt my operator to say, hey, your step is taking more than what it's supposed to do. can you go and check what is going on, right? So those are kind of things that we are trying to bring about as an empowerment to our operations. Again, reference batch, golden batch, standardizing solutions. You may have 4 control rooms in your plant. The most important thing is you don't want to go to between one control room to the other and have a totally different set of view and capabilities, right? Can you standardize across your facility so that if I take one operator from one control room and put him in another control room for rotation purposes, will he be able to do his job, right? So that is where standardization comes into picture, right? So these are some of the things that we were focused on from an operator effectiveness and value creation perspective to help us go forward. I know there's a lot going on and I'm talking a lot, and I'm sure there is some energy levels that is going down. And I know everybody's being quiet, and I told you don't ask questions yet, but I want to make sure that you're totally not lost or I'm not losing you here. Again, another example is how do you integrate the data, right? So I told you control systems plays a key role in our business as well, right? So right from our SAP or ERP systems to the heart of my control system, there is a level of integration that goes on. So this is just in a flow chart to explain what happens, right? So right from my business level, where somebody in California is sitting and saying, hey, I want to do this particular product in your facility, so many batches, so many pounds, so many gallons. They give me the order, and I'm able to do that in my DCS today and meet it, right? So business from California can control and demand what I have to do in my facility versus another facility in France versus another facility in Singapore, and where we are able to bring that and give that, and it's integrated to our DCS, right? So that is where the power of integration, power of technology is. Okay, optimizing management of change. I'm going to run through some of the slides so that we have some time for question and answers. So let's just run through it. You can see all this also. Again, advantage of early adoption, why you should be early adapters and not be left out, and not wanting to be always in a reactive mode versus proactive mode, right? So that's some of the things here. And then some of the most important lessons learned, how easily is laying out a plan, how flexible are you with your plan, what you have to do to maintain that you can do your plan, and how much are you prepared to modify your strategy, being an early adapter, having an organization capability. This is a very, very core thing. Doing these projects is one thing, but do you have the organization capability to run these projects and also maintain the systems going forward, right? So that's a very, very key aspect that you have to look into and plan into as you do these projects, right? So then all these new technologies come with their own downside too. If you go to Microsoft, okay, you've done all these technology upgrades, you've integrated, right? So you have to also remember that there is going to be constant upgrades and patches and things that they're going to be releasing based on cybersecurity, vulnerability requirements and all that. So do you have the people and wherewithals to continue to manage it and track it and manage it and maintain it, right? So that's a very, very key aspect of this. All these technologies and everything is nice. All you've heard is all the rosy picture, but what happens behind the scenes, there is also a lot of those other things that are unwanted consequences, that are undesirable consequences. When I was in my pneumatic age and digital hydraulic age, I didn't have to worry about all this. Now the world is changing. We're going to the digital age, and I have to worry about all this. I have to worry about cybersecurity, hackers coming in, my viruses coming in, my worms coming in, my malware coming in. So I have to think about all that, right? How do I defend my system from all those unwanted elements? That's technology comes with its own downside as well. It's not all a rosy picture. Again, having a trusted partner and value relationships comes in very handy with your technology vendors, with your groups, with your cross-functional teams. That is a very, very key element of this whole strategizing. All right, so pretty much that's where we are. In conclusion, we are upgrading, and I don't have to go through this. You know what I've been talking about. So with that, I think right about one, I think I try to rush through and finish as much as I could in allocated time. Do we have time for questions and answers?
For the benefit of everyone that's online, if you have a question, just raise your hand. I'll bring the mic over to you.
Nat, in your project planning, presumably project planning toward this virtualization of control systems, presumably you've done some risk analysis.
Yes.
What is the weight assigned to risk associated with these virtual farms where your data is? For example, is it is it susceptible to some sort of an EMP attack, or as you know, all these kind of things that can go wrong?
Yes. So if one of the previous slides, I said like OC and making sure that you have a plan for managing the patches and all that. It is definitely, the technology comes with its own risks, right? So that's why we do a risk assessment. So at Chevron, what we have is we have a very strong IT compliance and risk assessment team. When we go through deploying any technology, we have to go through and first get a clearance from them to say, hey, this is what we're trying to do. Especially when it comes to process control system, the rigors become even higher, right? You don't want to put your process and your production facilities in any kind of risk. So we have to do a risk assessment. We have to make sure they're, first of all, highly available. Your redundancy is maintained. If one goes down, as if the other, right? So all these virtualizations have built-in capabilities for high availability, reliability, and all that. But at the same time, you also have to have your own firewalls, your cybersecurity needs, and making sure your data integrity is maintained. Yes, it is possible, but again, you need to have your collaboration with your IT teams and involve them upfront when you're even evolving and planning these things, so that having a cross-functional team right from the get-go is very, very important to be able to mitigate some of these things later on.
There are some risks that you really can't control or anticipate, right?
But how much of, yeah, you're right, we cannot control, but at the same time, how much of capabilities that you're able to adapt and how much of administrative, see that when it comes to controls, right? When it comes to protection, right? There is technology, you can do engineered protection, you can do administrative controls, or you can build, there's different layers of protection, right? Like a Swiss cheese model, there's multiple layers of protection, right? So are you willing to adapt all these in there so that when one layer fails, there's another layer to protect it, right? So you have to, you have to have a strategy where you have to fall back. So to the next layer of protection, right? Yeah, exactly. So at the end of the day, it is just like what you do with your SIL analysis, right? LOPA, right? So that's the same thing. You have to do through the same things here in a different, but it's only in a different realm to make sure that, hey, I have a fallback plan. And if I have, what is my business interruption plan? What is my fallback plan? What happens if this system fails? Do I have another system? So for example, in Chevron, what we did was we also did not look at just redundancy from a equipment perspective. We looked at redundancy from a location geography perspective. So if I had my redundant systems, I put my primary in one control room, one rack room, and another one in another rack room in the other end of the plant, fed from a different power supply, fed from a different power source, everything. So that if something happens here and fails, the other one is still up and running to be able to feed the facility or to control the facility, right? So that's the kind of planning that you have to do. Even running the cables, you don't want to run the two cables in the same way. Run them in different routes and different conduits. Don't put two cables. Just because you have redundancy doesn't mean that you can put two cables in the same conduit. Put them in two different routes and two different conduits, right? So all this is very, very critical and important. Same thing with wireless also, right? So whether you do wired or wireless, even when you do wireless technologies, make sure that you have redundant communication paths to be able to establish that. So again, it all comes to planning, engineering, and administrative controls.
Sure. Okay.
Could you elaborate a little bit more on the boundary control? I want to see if I understand what you're suggesting here. Let me give you an example and tell you from on or off base here. So if you have a control point that's typical, like high alarm, low alarm, what you're advocating with this, I understand it, is operating within the high and low bandwidth, and maybe looking at things like, I don't know, like set point tree or rate of change or something like that.
Okay, I'm going to put a small picture on this to help visualize this better, right? So, for example, here's your process. Here's your set point where your process you would like to maintain, right? Say, for example, you have your alarms at this level, right? So typically what happens is it goes high and then high, right? Same thing, it goes low and low, depending on the process. Either one of this may be critical to you. But normally, our operations today, they are trying to come at this and they start trying to do something, right? And provided there's an operator on the board, when he gets an alarm and he's going to know what to do and he's going to taking time. And then again, depending on the process, how long is it going to be from when it goes from this alarm to this alarm, which is a critical state right now. So do you want to wait till this stage comes in before they can react, or is there something that you can do to manage the process even before it comes there? So this is what the boundary management or operations monitoring is right now, is to let it control within a band which is closer to your set point requirements for your process, and not let it go outside of that set point before it gets into an alarm state. So think of alarm as an abnormal situation, whether it's low or low or high or high. Alarm is an abnormal situation and it's a reactive mode. Can you do something to prevent it and run your plant at a more optimum level to get better throughput, better efficiencies, right? So that is what this is. And it's based on ISA 584 principle, or API 584 principles.
Okay, but our understanding is within that area there in the middle that you've narrowed, are you doing something different than just lowering the high alarm and raising the low alarm?
No,
Okay, so
we are
you're
not.
saying-
So these are still going to be your traditional alarms.
No, but I'm saying, are you putting tighter boundaries on the high and low?
No, we are not. We are managing, we are trying to do things with the process and automation to see how we can keep the boundary process to run at that boundary level and not excurse.
Doing something like, set point creep detector.
Yes.
rate of change detector.
Rate of change detector, stuff like that.
Changing
It varies.
at 3 pounds per minute, which means I'm gonna hit the high alarm within,
So many minutes, correct.
okay.
So, and then how do I indicate this to operations, right? So for example, if I have a shape, right? Say if I have a pressure loop, so I'll have a shape in my graphic, which has got my pressure like a typical dial gauge, right? So I may have my low here, high here. So it may go to yellow when it comes to low or the first boundary, and then it goes to red in the second boundary. So, so second alarm level. So if my process is supposed to be here, if this is my boundary, the way I do it is as soon as it excurses this, I change this whole color to blue. Now the operator knows that, hey, he's not running within a boundary. He has to do something proactively before it gets into an alarm stage. So there's different ways to implement it. There's different technologies. There's different programming you can do, but it's a concept.
Any other questions? I've got one. So as far as operators, getting them to buy in,
Yeah.
And you have to take a first step, as you mentioned. So you got to start somewhere. What was the biggest bang for the buck for an operator? So what's an operator? What made their life easier from the get-go?
So a few things, right? So when we did this, another thing we did also is like modernize our control rooms. So we used to have 4 monitors for every station. Now we had one big 55-inch monitor. Modernize our control rooms, made them sit-stand desks. Some of the things that we are able to adapt, and then use the ASM guidelines for designing our graphics, abnormal situation management guidelines, reducing the number of standing alarms for them, right? So how can they not flip through 100 pages of graphics before they can get to a particular shape or object that they need to work on a particular process, right? How can I make it more easily manageable, right? So now I went with the high performance graphics where they can have an overview screen. We can get all the important information about their unit that they're controlling, and how do I segregate my scope of responsibility so that they don't get alarms from another unit on their screen. So there's a multitude of things that we had to go through, and we had to prove them by example of why, because they were very reluctant first to go from a traditional graphics to this new grayscale ASM graphics, right? It was a major struggle for us to be able to break their monotone there in terms of then we had to prove with examples of, okay, give them real examples of, okay, give them 2 displays and identify a problem in this loop, in this display versus this display, how long it takes, right? So we're able to create some real life examples to make them realize the value of it. So that's some of the things that we did.
Any other questions? Going online? Okay. All right. Well, Nat, thank you very much for doing the presentation for us today.
Oh, very welcome.
And our next meeting, just stay tuned. We'll probably potentially do a membership type drive, maybe at UNO here in October, and then meetings after that. So just stay tuned to our emails and our website for more information on upcoming events. All right, thanks.